We would like to learn about and provide input, help you learn about and provide input in the future Miradi roadmap. And then most importantly, we want you to be inspired to use Miradi for your appropriate projects and programs. So this is your opportunity to kind of get to know Miradi and learn more. I will warn you, this is a course where we're going to make some assumptions that people already know a fair amount about the conservation standards and even a little bit about Miradi. So this is not a 101 course in terms of the conservation standards in Miradi, but for those who are maybe hadn't seen Miradi in a while, hopefully this course will be appropriate, this class. So what we're going to do is we're going to give 15 minutes of introduction, and then we are going to give you a plenary overview of some of the new Miradi features for about 25 minutes. The highlight of today's activity is going to be the Miradi challenge, where you're going to be in a breakout group and you're going to get to try it yourself and to see if you can complete the Miradi challenge. Then we're going to give you a little preview of coming attractions, where I'll talk a little bit about Miradi's new pricing structure, and then we'll have 5 minutes to wrap things up and do an evaluation. So just like remember in the old days when you used to actually travel places, you used to get on the airplane, and the airplane, before they closed the door, said, this plane is about to go to Los Angeles. And if you don't want to go to Los Angeles, this is the time to get off the plane. So now you can see where this plane is going, where this course is going. And if anyone wants to go have dinner or breakfast or whatever, this is your chance to go do something else. Oh, look, everyone's still there. Great. Very exciting. Okay, so I'm going to start with this introduction. So this is about Miradi. And one thing we are going to need you to do is, if you don't already have an account with Miradi, or what used to be called Miradi Share, it might be helpful to go create a free account and put your account name and email in the Zoom chat. It's not absolutely necessary. We'll get by with if most people have accounts, because we will be able to share a little bit. But if you don't have an account, go to miradi.org. If you already do have an account, don't worry about it. Just sit back and watch the show. All right, so as I said, this is in relation to the open standards for the practice of conservation, which have gone through an evolution from 2013 to 2020. And Miradi, of course, is a tool to help people use those. Within the conservation standards, early on, we talked about projects as being the basic unit of conservation work. But as you'll see, we're actually having a bit of a switch here, where now strategy pathways are becoming maybe a more fundamental basic unit of conservation work, where, of course, a strategy pathway is an action leading to some outcome. You go through some intermediate results to get there, and then you have some activities and your objectives and goals that are attributes of those factors. And so for us, this is really the fundamental unit of conservation work that goes on. These are, of course, organized into what? Projects. So a project is a group of people trying to accomplish something. And so in this case, maybe restoring wetlands or doing something, you have that project team. And the reason is they may be doing several of these strategy pathways that are part of their project, and their task is to figure out how to optimize that work. And so when Miradi was first designed, it was really thinking about projects. But as you'll see, we're both taking Miradi to a finer scale, thinking about these pathways. But then we're also organizing these projects into what we call higher level programs. So if you have that project out there in the landscape somewhere, there may be a bunch of sibling projects that are going on doing similar things. And then maybe for funding purposes or for administrative purposes, those projects are organized into something called a program. That program also has pathways, things that it's trying to accomplish as well as a team. And so you can think of it as also a higher level project of its own. And we'll come back to that more later on in today's session when we talk about program level work. But for now, we'll focus on projects as a starting point. As you all know, good practice requires integrating the conservation standards to business processes and systems. And so this is a little thought piece that Annette Stewart, who's on the call, put together. And I think Annette very astutely observed that if you think about the conservation standards as a cycle, you can flatten it out and it turns into a business process. So the things that you have to do to make conservation happen. And your organization probably also has a bunch of other processes that it's going through. So there's fundraising, there's financial management, there's people management. So there are all these tasks, all these things that your organization is doing over time to get its work done and achieve your missions. What Annette observed is that organizations invest a lot of money in the business IT systems to support your, say, donor relationships or your financial planning. If you were on the board of an organization and it didn't have good computer software to manage your finances, your board members and your managers and your funders would go, you know what, WTF, like what's with this organization? It doesn't have any IT systems to manage this core part of its business. But up until a few years ago, if you look at how people manage that core conservation work, how did people do that? Well, people sent emails and they did plans in Office and in PowerPoint, and they created little templates, and everybody had sort of a random different way of doing their work. So it's kind of weird that our core business for conservationists is not done supported by IT work, but everything else is. And so Miradi was designed to help fix that. And basically Miradi is designed to help people implement the conservation standards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Miradi does specifically in terms of managing individual projects more effectively, combining projects into programs, and then learning from others. But as you'll see here, we'll start on the project bit. So in terms of managing projects online, we can be more effective if teams can work collaboratively on Miradi projects and stakeholders can get instant access to key project information, so they adapt and improve their projects, and so you get to effective resource conservation. So a little history here. Many of you have been along for this journey and this ride, so this will be a kind of little walk through memory lane. But in 2005, Miradi started as desktop software, and one of our models was TurboTax. So we just had created these conservation standards. Just like here in the States, you have to fill out your complicated tax forms, and you download the software program. It walks you step by step through the process of doing your taxes, but it also gives you all the forms that you need to fill out to do the work. And so that was a real model of, hey, how can we help people get through these newly emerging conservation standards? So as you may remember, we created Miradi, and it had this little interview up on top where it was walking through the steps, and then it gave you the stuff down below to do, say, a threat ranking, or the tools to do a situation analysis or a results chain, all those things in diagram view. Because back then in 2005, the cloud really didn't exist all that much, and certainly where conservationists were working, it was difficult to access it. So we did it as desktop software, and it was something you had to download and work on your computer. Even back then, though, we started saying, okay, even though everyone's working individually, when you start like thinking, I have a threat of shark finning here, I can tie that to the standard classification that IUCN and CMP developed. We can call that a standard classification of threats. And now we're starting to get data in a structured fashion about our projects that other people might be interested in. So that led us to say, well, maybe in 2013, we can take that information online and create. And so we created the first version of Miradi Share as a tool to take those desktop files. You couldn't edit them online, but at least you could share them and see them and do things with them and make sense of them. So there was this whole, if you remember, check-in, check-out process that many of you are familiar with that you had to do. That was fine, but people were not totally satisfied with that, neither were we. And we said, well, instead of a Dropbox paradigm where you check in and check out, we actually want to move to a paradigm more like Google Docs, where you can actually edit the information online. So in 2019, we began the process of creating Miradi online, which is what you can see here. It has a much more modern interface. It has the ability to take your information and edit it. And over the last 2 or 3 years, we've been in the process of increasing more and more what you can edit online versus having to do it in the desktop world. And we're proud to say we're almost complete with one exception, or 2 small exceptions, of having everything that you wanted to do on the desktop, you can now do online. So you can edit the information in place. One of the things that's really important, and Kari will show you more about this in a bit, is if you have the information online, you have to control who sees it. So you have a lot of ability to assign people to be on who's on your project, who has different roles, editors or managers or viewers of the information. You can make your information fully public, or you can make it team only. So you control who sees and who plays with your data over time. I am really proud to say that we now have full or almost full online diagramming. And so as you'll see, and you'll get to practice more, there's a lot of tools to do what we could do in Miradi Desktop and now do it online. But along the way, we also tried to add a bunch of new cool features and make it much more friendly and much more modern in terms of how the interface works. So that's the main, one of the things that we really want to share that you are going to get to play with. We also have online the ability to update progress ratings and results. So you can take your different activities, your strategies, or your different results, and you can create these colored lights to show how are you on track over time. And that becomes the basis for pausing and reflecting and doing good adaptive management work. You can also now put online things like your objectives, your indicators, and your measurements, and then you get these little charts that show what are your measurements against where your desired future status is, and you can start to track those things over time, get little indicators to show the progress along these different things. So there's a lot of interesting things that we can do by having this stuff online. We've even able to build online things we could never do in the desktop world, like basic spatial mapping. And so here's a case where now in Miradi Online, you can take your project and the different chunks of your project, so it's project boundary or scope, the different targets, your threats, and you can create points, lines, or polygons that represent those entities. This is a really good example, though, of what we're trying to do with Miradi Online. We are not trying to compete with Esri products or Google Maps or Mapbox or all the other sophisticated mapping programs, because we'll never be able to keep up with those guys and what they're developing. So we wanted to develop enough mapping capacity that you could have those point signs or polygons, but then maybe export that or import them to those other projects to do more sophisticated GIS analyses. So the whole key is to position Miradi both as a tool that helps project managers do what they need to do, but also as part of their broader IT ecosystem to really interface with appropriate programs that are out there to do other parts of the work. As another example, that we now support one-click MS Word report generation. So if you have a program and you have a bunch of projects that are all replicating something, you can create this template. It looks a little scary, but you don't need a full coding degree in order to be able to create that, or we can help you create that. And then if you run that against the projects in your program, you get these really nice formatted reports with all your latest information that pop right out of them. So there's a lot of kind of cool things that we can do. So that's a ton in a hurry, just kind of showing you stuff on screen. That's not very helpful from a learning point of view. So what we thought we'd do is take the next 25 minutes. Kari's going to give you a tour of some of the new Miradi features, and you have to pay attention because you're going to have to know what those features are in order to complete the Miradi challenge. So that's going to be the next part of this, is to go through the Miradi challenge. So let me stop pausing. Let me turn it over, stop sharing. And Kari, if you want to take over.
All right. Are you guys now looking at the homepage for Miradi? Okay. So just as a reminder, Nick mentioned early, oh, Nick's stepping away from the desk there. I guess I'm on my own now. I was going to suggest you put your account name in the chat box, which you can still do if you've just recently signed up for a Miradi Share account. We'll make sure to get you in the program for the challenge. You don't have to have a Miradi account, but it would be great for you to be able to play in the demo space. So go ahead and do that. This is the Miradi homepage, and the system, of course, has logged me out while we were waiting. I will, oh, there we go. Hi, Kari, welcome back. So I'm going to do a demo here. And this is, as Nick mentioned earlier, it's going to be a demonstration that really assumes you know a little bit of the basics of Miradi. We're going to show you the basics of how to get into programs and projects. But then we'll go straight to a bunch of the new exciting features that have just come online in the last few months, and some of the core Miradi functions that we're now able to do online. So this is going to be quite quick. We're not expecting anyone to be able to follow along on their own, but you're welcome to if you want. But it's also being recorded, and you'll have about 45 minutes to play in this space after the demo. So the key features that we're going to hit, first I'm going to show you how to get into programs and projects. We're then going to demonstrate the great new online diagramming space. We're going to show you some brand new factors that are in development and just launched over the weekend. Then we're going to cover all the different ways to do progress reporting on various elements in your Miradi project file. And last but not least, we'll get to actual viability and threat rating, which you can now do online, which is very exciting. And I have asked Nick to man the admission for the space so we can still let people in while we're going. Okay. So here's Miradi Share, and I am logged in. If you're new to Miradi and you need to log in or sign up for a new account, it's up here in the upper right. What you'll notice once you get into the space, projects are organized in two ways within the space. On the left, you can pull up My Projects, and what you'll see is both publicly available programs as well as programs that you're a member of. You can see I'm a member of a bunch of programs, and there's also a bunch of publicly available programs. And projects, this is the little number here. You can see how many projects I have access to within each program. But then there's also a whole bunch of standalone projects, and there's actually hundreds of standalone projects in Miradi. It just, there's 6 that I'm a member of. So projects will either be standalone or they'll be in a program space. The program spaces give you more access to collaborative editing, as well as a few other features like the report templates, and also aggregating data across multiple projects. So when you put a project in a program, it just gives you additional functionality. For the purposes of this demonstration, we set up a demo program. So in the Miradi demonstration program, which is where you will go, and we'll give you instructions once the breakout rooms are set up. In the Miradi demonstration program, there are a number of projects And I'm going to use one demonstration project within this space to walk through the new features. Within the program space, you can see all the projects listed here, which you guys will be working in later. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom to go to the template that I'm using for the demonstration. And then I'll walk you through the basic organization of a project space. There's a few things that we didn't add to this demonstration project. For any project, any Miradi project, you can add photos and have a slide reel across the top, and that'll show up here. It's fully editable by anyone with editor access to the project or the project manager. And we didn't add any spatial data to this project, but this is where the spatial data would show up that Nick mentioned to you. And then also just any fields in here for which you have editor access will have the little pop-up editor pencil there, and then it'll give you an interface like you can see here where you can edit directly, save, and cancel. So I'm not going to cover that too much more, but just note that many of the fields that you can edit now directly just have that little pencil that shows up if you have editor access. So let's see. So within a project, a couple of things that I wanted to show before we get into a lot of the new features. The team members, you can add team members to your project. And as Nick mentioned, you can set the access. We have 5 different access levels for team members on the project. These are people who can view or edit or manage the project. And then you can also set up the access level for the project, which also sets permissions for larger spaces, like people with similar organizational email, or for program or public viewing. So there's multiple ways that you can control the access to the project and protect sensitive information if you need to, or make everything public. So that's the team members for your project. There's also a space under the action tab right now online where you can define different people that are really resources for your project, and they have different roles in the project. So there's a few different places in Miradi online where you can identify the people that work on the project. And one of the things in the pipeline for the near term is also developing the additional space where you can really identify all of those partners and the full team that's working on your project. But that's in the pipeline for hopefully in the next few months. Finally, just with the project overview, so I'm in the project overview tab here. For every project, you have a full archive of all of the edits ever done in the project. So you can see here edits that were made by various people. This all happens to be me for the project over time. You can revert to any of those old versions of the project. You can also download full versions of the project as a zip file to open on the desktop if you need to. You have this timeline which shows you where edits were made and is a living archive of your project. A new feature that we just added is the ability to create set snapshots. So you can initiate saving an entire project snapshot. So it's a zip file of your project. You can create that snapshot either here, or you can create it up at the top here in the upper left, where you can create a snapshot or access previous snapshots. But this is really pretty useful, because the project snapshots, for example, I created a snapshot just before this session, so we have the content in the state it was before this session in case we want to revert to it. So you can use these snapshots really as permanent or as temporary archives of your project. You can manage them over time and keep them if you want to, or you can delete them once you have moved through the process of needing to access that archived information. So that's a new feature that just came out within the last couple of months. I think that's all I wanted to show on the overall project summary page. So within the project, the way you navigate through the content, you have these higher level navigation buttons up here at the top, and then you have these sub buttons across the bottom. And what we're going to do is navigate to one of the diagram spaces here, or one of the content areas in the project. So I think most of you are probably familiar with theories of change or results chains. So when you click on the theory of change tab, what you see under that tab is just one sub tab, which is the results chain tab here. This first part of the demo on new features is really going to focus on this new online diagramming space. So right now we're in diagram view. We have the results chains pulled up, and across the top, underneath the results chain bar, we have a set of tools across the top. And then we have a set of tools to interact with the diagram on the left here and on the right. The first thing I'm going to show you is my favorite button, which is the full screen button. That zooms you out, so you really have a nice big diagram canvas to work in. And then also across the top are some super useful layout tools. So for example, zoom to fit makes you immediately snap to the diagram. This is the challenge course you're going to look at later. I'm going to navigate to another theory of change for the purposes of this demonstration that's a little bit simpler here. I'm going to delete that box right there. So this is the diagram canvas in the middle with different panels for interacting with the diagram on the outside. Across the top, you can navigate between situation model diagrams and results chain diagrams by toggling these buttons here. You can add brand new diagrams by clicking on the new tab. You have a folder with a drop-down menu that shows all of your results chains, or if you're in the situation model menu, it shows you all of your situation model diagrams. You can easily tab through those. You can also tab through them down here at the bottom, stepping through them using these arrows. Jumping over to the far right, I already used the full screen view, but I could go back to normal view by clicking this button. You also have the ability to switch between this new online palette that you're looking at here and the desktop palette, which might be more familiar to some of you. You can navigate back and forth there. And then you can also export diagrams directly from this view. And one important thing about the diagram export is the export, so either a PNG or an SVG, which is a vector file that you can actually edit and interact with. These will export exactly what you see here. So if you'll get all of that white space, or you can zoom in to have the diagram fit your canvas a little better if you want to. So your export will take this entire snapshot of this white canvas. And I'll show you in a little while where you can turn different factors on and off using the visibility view. And this export button will allow you to export exactly what you see from this canvas. So also along the top are some tools to help you lay out the diagram factors. You can toggle a grid on and off if you like to work with a grid. And you can also use tools which allow you to snap to grid, for example. So you can move factors and they'll snap to these lines on the grid, or you can switch and you can use smart guidelines, which allow you to line up factors, for example, with the middle or the top or the bottom or the left or right with other factors in the diagram. So these tools up here are really about undoing and redoing actions, and then also just laying out and organizing the information on your canvas. So those are the high level diagram tools. On the left is where you can add and delete add factors, and where you can adjust the visibility of factors. So over on the left, the full diagram properties here, you can edit any content about the diagram, for example, the summary. We'll get into progress updates later. You can also delete diagrams from this space. To add factors to the content, you open the add factor menu, and then you simply drag a factor to the canvas. It prompts you to enter content in the box, and then you're done. You have a new factor on the canvas, which you can drag and position anywhere on the canvas. You'll notice here that the factors that are available in the add factor menu, they're really what we call the primary factors or the parent factors of the diagram. They exist on their own in the canvas, but you also are probably familiar with other factors like activities, objectives, and indicators. And you can now add those directly in the diagram too, but you don't add them from the add factor menu, you add them from their parent factor menu. So for example, for a strategy, if I click on the strategy, you'll see activities here. And if I click on the yellow activity button there, I can add activities to the strategy. Similarly, for results, which allow you to add objectives and indicators, I can just click on the objective where I can add an additional objective, or if no objective shows up yet in that same space, I can click an objective. And then I can also do the same, click the indicator icon and just add directly from the canvas. I will get into the right-hand menu a little more later. That's really the editing menu. But since we're talking about adding factors, I just want to point out that if you have the factor properties button open, you are also able to add what we call child factors or related factors here. So for example, I am on a biophysical result here, one of the primary factors in the model, and I can add an objective or I can add an indicator. So there's really multiple ways to add content. Oops, and that sometimes happens there. Let me refresh. There's multiple ways to add content to diagrams in the diagram space, or to add factors in the diagram space. So let me see what else here. Once you add factors into the diagram, again, you can move them around by just clicking and dragging anywhere on the canvas. To link factors, once you click on a factor, you'll see this little arrow button at the top. And you can grab that arrow button. You'll see it is now highlighted in pink, and it'll allow you to link to any other factor that lights up as pink. So I've now linked my result box to the target over there on the right. And once you create a link, automatically bend points are provided within that link. So it's pretty easy to adjust the format of the link. If you don't like what you did, you can easily click on that and straighten it out quickly. So again, links are just by clicking on the box and then selecting the link button and linking to any factors that are able to be linked. Finally, within the diagram canvas on the left menu, you can control the visibility of all of the factors on your box by clicking the little eye icon on and off. And you can see things turning on and off there. So you can simplify the diagrams for presentation and discussion purposes. You can also turn the status lights on and off. So you can, again, simplify the diagram a little bit there if you want to. So visibility tools are pretty useful and really help with presentation. You can also set the visibility differently and then use that to export an image that only includes certain content if you want. Final thing with the menus on the left, what I want to show you is, I think this pretty useful. You'll notice in the upper right-hand side of any of these panels, you can detach the panel from the canvas or the window on the left. And then if you double click at the top, it expands and contracts. So you can actually dock a bunch of these up at the top. And if you're familiar with SketchUp, this is very similar to the way SketchUp works. It's pretty nice. You can resize these the way you want to. And if you want to drag a bunch of factors onto the canvas, this is a nice way to sort of move the menu wherever you want to, and then you can close it when you're done. So that's how to add factors and move factors around. Once you have factors in the diagram, there's a couple of ways to edit content. You may have noticed I clicked directly. If I double click on a factor, it pops up a simple editor tool. So you can double click and quickly update the text for your factor, or for more comprehensive editing of the factor content, there's a little piece of paper icon here, which is also up in the upper right. That button allows you to fully edit any of the content that is in any of the factors, as well as any of the related content. And I'll go to one that has a bit more related content. So there's summary information. We'll talk about progress updates in just a moment, but you can also see the related factors objectives. I can navigate through and edit all of that content, as well as the indicators. And all of these have the same little editor pencil. For people without editing access, you'll be able to see all of this content, but they won't be able to edit. So it's still fully visible, just not editable. Let's see. Okay, something that's brand new that many of you may not know yet is copy, paste, and move and share. So for any of these factors, there's now a 3-button icon up here, or you can use a right click and you get full copy, share, move, and paste functions. You also can use a Control-C. It'll tell you that you copied the factor to the clipboard, and then if you use a Control-V or a right click, you'll get the option to share a factor if you're on a different diagram, or copy the factor if you're on the same diagram. It also prompts you to select whether or not you want to include any of the related content. So this is a very rich feature. It's also quite new. So you'll see there's the copied factor down below. And it's actually a pretty quick way to do a bunch of copy and pasting quickly. You can see that it retains that copy in the clipboard, so I can copy a whole bunch of factors if I want to, one after the other. And I can also just use the delete key to delete them if I want to go back to the original diagrams. So the same copy and paste feature works for objectives. For example, you can copy or move objectives to different factors in the diagram or in other diagrams. And the same with the indicators, copy and paste and move indicators to other places in the diagram. This just came out within the last few weeks, so we're really looking forward to people testing this out and telling us how it's working. Then finally, just a little bit about formatting the diagrams.
Hey, Kari, one note on that.
Yeah.
And some of you may have been frustrated by the lack of copy over the last few weeks. That's why we're trying to build it up. Today, you can only copy one factor at a time. Hopefully, in a few weeks, you'll be able to copy multiple factors. So that's the last piece that's coming.
Yes, thank you for that clarity. Yeah, or clarification. Yeah. So the last thing here is just the formatting, which, you know, making diagrams pretty and making them attractive is really one of the things that makes them very powerful. So you'll notice there's this little paintbrush icon at the top of any factor I click on. It's also on the right. If you click on the paintbrush icon, you can change the font size, the font style, how it looks. You can change the color. And one thing that's nice is you can select multiple factors at once. Select that paintbrush icon and you can change multiple factors at once to the same style, which can be very useful. You can do that for your whole diagram if you want to. You might have also noticed that, let's make some of these a little bit unaligned. If you click multiple factors at once, in addition to the factor styling tool, you get these alignment tools, and it allows you to quickly align multiple factors at once. So hopefully these tools will make your online diagramming experience very pleasant. And I think that was all I wanted to cover for diagrams. I want to hop over to our development space. This is not live yet, but this is really pretty darn exciting. A new feature that we're testing right now is a new element for Miradi. So you'll notice this kind of off-colored green-blue thing up here. We haven't decided on the color, but what you can add now in Miradi, once this goes live, is outputs. So for strategies and activities, you're able to add any number of outputs. These are often things you can think about as like the deliverables from a contract or the deliverables from a project. You can add an output just like you would any other element. If you open it up, you can see it's related to an activity. You have all of the standard summary, classification, and progress updates. And for any strategy or activity, you can have more than one output. So you can track outputs at whatever level or whatever detail you would like. And if you open a strategy and go to the factor properties for the strategies, you can see all the activities that are related to the activity, or all the outputs that are related to the activities for that strategy. So this is a great new feature we're really excited about that we've been hearing a lot of interest in for a number of years. So outputs should be coming your way to a Miradi project, or yeah, coming to a Miradi project near you soon. So the next thing I was going to move over to is the tracking trees. Actually, I'll show progress tracking here in the diagram first. So there's multiple ways to track progress in Miradi, and you can track progress on pretty much everything here in the diagram now. So we have at the strategy and activity level, you can see these green buttons in the lower right. This is the progress status. You can view data about the progress, or you can add any new progress status reports here directly from the diagram. If you open the factor, you'll also be able to see an archive of all of the past progress updates. The newest one is shown first, and you can see all of the past progress updates. You can also edit and add new progress updates here. So that exact same feature works not only for strategies, but also for activities where you can add progress status. For results, we also have results status. You can do the same thing. You can view, or you can add and edit results status in the same way. Objectives and indicators, we report on progress a little bit differently. We tend to report on progress as % progress, and you can see in the factor properties menu on the right, you can edit or add progress updates. Similarly for indicators, you can see the measure, both the indicator chart Nick was showing earlier, as well as current measurements and the desired future status for indicators. One of the newest features here is viability information being available both in the diagram form and in a viability table I'll show you in a moment. But for any target, you can see this P here with the bright red oval, that's poor rating for the target. If you open the factor properties, you can see you're now able to edit the viability status here directly in the diagram, both the current status and the future viability status. So reporting and tracking on progress on your project or on your results chain here is possible at multiple levels. You can also see the same information in a tracking tree under the progress tab. And these tracking trees are separated into 3 trees, into 3 different buckets of information. I'm going to expand this tracking tree so you can see all results chains in the project. And then I'm going to expand one of the results chains here. Whoops, wrong one. I'm going to expand the second results chain here. What you can see in this action tracking tree is all of the same information we were just looking at in the diagram related to strategies and actions. So the action tracking is all about things that you're doing. And you can see the progress status we were just working with over here on the right. If you click on the strategy, you can see the exact same menu of attributes or menu of information about a strategy, including the progress tracking here, and the same menu for adding and updating progress. Moving across the progress menu here, you can see that we also have all of the results tracking that you looked at earlier, or that I showed you earlier in the diagram. You can see the ability to report on progress on any of these results in the right-hand menu using the same format. And then for impact tracking, this is really about how are our targets doing. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the most exciting things I think that we've been able to add in the last month or so is viability status. So you can now see the viability status for the target, where you can edit the current status and the desired future status. You can see the status and edit the status for goals. And for targets which have KEAs and associated indicators, you can see the viability ratings and even define the viability ratings for any indicators, both defining the bins as well as providing any of the detail, along with the current measurements and desired future status with their ratings relative to the viability rating chart.
Kari,
For targets,
1 or 2
yeah.
minutes.
Okay, great. Yep, we're just about done here. So that's the viability status. And I just wanted to hop over to one other place in the model here, or in the project, which is under the situation assessment tab. We were just looking at viability under the progress tab, and you can see target viability summarized here also in the viability table. So this is the exact same information that we were looking at just a moment ago with the target, the goals, the KEAs, and the indicators. Also under the situation assessment, this just was released this weekend, which is very exciting, is the ability to complete threat rating. So what you're looking at here, the targets are across the top coral reef, sharks, and seagrass beds. The threats are down the left, and the impact of the threat on the left on the target on the top is in this cell here. And what we can now do, which is very exciting, is either complete a new threat rating, or we can update a threat rating by changing our rating here in this threat rating window, including your threat rating evidence, including comments. And then you'll notice it tells you that your new threat rating will be recalculated upon close. I click X and we should see that recalculate. There we go. Now it's a high rating. So your threat rating information can now be directly edited in here. And I think that was it for all of the new features. Yeah. Nick, I am done.
Thank you, Kari. Whoosh. So that was a ton in a hurry. So I'm going to take back the screen sharing here, and we're going to go on. We know that that was probably overwhelming. That was probably a lot. And practicing the principles of adult learning, we don't want to just lecture at you. We want you to try it. So we have devised something we are calling the Miradi Challenge. Are you guys all braced and ready? Is everybody like had your performance enhancing substances and you're ready for the challenge here? Okay, so we're gonna try it. And here are the rules for the Miradi Challenge. You are going to be assigned to a breakout group. Your first task is to have everyone in the group introduce themselves. And then we're going to ask one person who has a valid Miradi account and a decent internet connection to share their screen in the breakout group and to log into the projects page of the Miradi demo program. So go to that, and you can just find it as Kari showed you by looking in your My Programs. You should be a member of the Miradi demo program, and you'll find, we want you to click on the project that corresponds to your Zoom breakout group number. This is important to see if you guys can follow instructions, right? So if I'm in Zoom breakout group 6, I'm going to come to session 2-06, and that's the project I'm going to work on. Make sense to folks? You're going to go to your Zoom breakout group number. Someone asked a question in the chat, can multiple people work on the same Miradi diagram? And the answer is yes, but it's not, we'll be really honest, it's not like Mural or Miro or some of these graphics programs where you can have 1 million people moving stickies around a tarp and things like that. It has to refresh, and Miradi is more complicated because, as you know, the data underneath it, it's an underlying database and things are linked. And so you can't, it's a little bit more tricky to have multiple people working on something. And so as good conservation coaches, what we generally are anticipating people would do would be in a situation like we're going to show you in these breakout groups, where the facilitator might have Miradi open on their screen and people would be working and discussing things together, and then the facilitator might make changes. Now, other people can also make changes, or they could be working on other, so like if you're in a workshop and you have one group working on one diagram and another group working on another diagram, they can all be part of the same project and working on the same diagram, or different diagrams, that's fine. It's just that it's not fully like Mural. It's more like a sticky tarp, and having a facilitator work on things is going to generally work better. But the other nice thing of having it all online, of course, is then between sessions, if people want to come edit it, different people can come edit it, people can have access. So it's a kind of a modified version of sharing. And in fact, one of the stories that we want to build over time is the ability to maybe start a diagram on Mural or Miro and then import it into Miradi and then go from there. So taking advantage of the group exercise capabilities that that platform offers, not trying to compete and recreate that, but also then kind of seeing where Miradi has strengths, if that makes sense to folks. Anyway, coming back to the challenge, we're going to, in your group, you're going to zoom to fit, and then you can also zoom in a little bit, and you're going to click on this very first results chain that says the Miradi Challenge course. And in the Miradi Challenge course, if you zoom in, you can see there's a beginner pathway, an intermediate pathway, and then if you're really good, the expert pathway. And so what we're going to ask you to do in your group is to go through the beginner pathway, and you're going to start to step B1, beginner 1, and it says find our first target in the space above and change it to your favorite animal. So you're going to follow directions, and if you scroll above, you'll find our first target, and you need to change that to whatever you agree on your favorite animal. Then your next step is to add a strategy to your diagram and create an activity for it. So you're going to have to add a strategy and figure out how to do that. Then you have to add a new threat reduction result, an intermediate result to your diagram. Then you have to create links between the new factors. Once you've gone through these, remember these progress ratings that Kari showed you? We want you to update your progress rating to mark your progress through the challenge course. So once you've completed this activity, you might want to come in here and say that we have completed that activity. Or maybe you had troubles with it, major issues or minor issues, in which case you can mark it accordingly. And then you can also, when you get to the bottom of those 4 activities, you will have completed this result, hopefully. We know the basics of adding, editing, diagram factors, and you can also update that result status. So your task is to march through the activities and the results here, and then maybe to the intermediate, and then we'll see if anyone gets to the expert pathway over time. Is that fairly clear to folks?
And if you want to start at intermediate expert, that's fine too.
No.
So you don't have to start.
You can decide wherever your group wants. Okay, we'll be a little more flexible. All right, so coming back to the thing. So you're going to navigate, you're going to go through the challenge course. You're going to track your progress using the Miradi activities and results progress tracking feature. If any of you have issues or need help, have one person leave the breakout room and come back to the plenary, or you can also call us for help. We'll come help you. And you have about 40 minutes to get as far as your group can. So let's see how far you guys can get in the challenge. The project level pathway to the program level pathway, we can then track how money flows from the funder down, but we can also track how results and objectives aggregate up, and also learning can be shared a little bit more efficiently. So we think these pathways are really a key part of that work, and we're going to be creating that as an object in Miradi to enable this to happen. So it'll allow a grant maker to select key pieces of a project and roll them up the funding program pathway. But this architecture will also allow for form-based entry into Miradi without having to create full Miradi project files. So for example, if you're a funder and you're running 1,000 carbon projects, you don't really want to create a Miradi file for each of those 1,000 individual site-based projects. But I think we can do things that they're sort of represented more in forms and fields, and we can be a lot more efficient in how this work happens. Another key to this is to roll up that data. We have both Annette and Mike Honey on the call here, and they're the experts in this realm of the world. But we would like to take, as we showed you before, Miradi information might be combined with information from your finance system or your fundraising system or whatever. And we want to create these really cool charts and graphs and analyses and make sense of the data. There's some very powerful packages out there that other people have created. Power BI is a Microsoft version. Right now, Miradi supports that. We may eventually support Tableau, which is a similar package as well. But the idea here is that you're taking that information and mashing it up and then creating the charting and graphing or whatever you need to do the business analytics. The thing to enable that is something called an API, or application program interface, where instead of just manually downloading your Miradi information and putting it into Power BI, we can actually create a pipeline that allows that as you change stuff in Miradi, it also gets changed in your servers, and all that updates automatically. A lot of this already exists as a prototype or even as a working example, but we want to increase and improve that over time. And Mike on this call is the person to talk to, among others, for that. So that's a lot of what we're doing in terms of combining projects into programs. I just want to touch base quickly on some of the stuff that we're going to do in terms of learning from others as well. So a lot of this is about evidence. How can we incorporate evidence into practice? Which of course is if we're trying to do rat ship protection to stop our seabirds from getting eaten. How do we know the evidence of whether that intervention, that pathway is actually working? So there's a bunch of work that's been going on to sort of improve the open standards, the conservation standards ability to do this. There was a paper published a couple of years. We just have a new book coming out on this topic. And then we've done some really cool work with Parks Canada as well, testing and kind of evaluating a methodology for bringing in evidence into conservation work. And so evidence for us now is the relevant data, information, knowledge, and wisdom used to assess one or more assumptions related to a question of interest. So again, this pyramid where you take case-specific evidence and you synthesize it and use to create knowledge, and then that knowledge comes and informs, that generic evidence informs ongoing practice. So how do we bake this into Miradi? So the key here is that you have to have, we think, analytical questions which are articulated as assumptions. So you might have both existing evidence, things you already know about your project or program, and then there's new evidence. And then you can think about evidence that comes from inside your program or project, and then evidence that comes from outside your project or program. And so in that upper left-hand quadrant, your specific evidence base is what you use to test specific things you already know about your project, those claims. The generic evidence base is stuff that the rest of the world knows about similar or related claims. And then over time, where you have gaps or where you don't know things, you're articulating hypotheses that become the basis for your program monitoring, or maybe collaborative learning where you're learning across programs. So there's this sort of relationship between assumptions. It's always an assumption If you know enough to already believe it, then it's a claim. If you don't know enough yet, that assumption is a hypothesis. And so either way, what you have to do is in your situation analysis, you have to specify those questions / assumptions that you're making. So in this case, it could be about the status of our seabirds in our situation analysis, or could there be assumption about what is the major threat? And so you're stating both that assumption as a testable claim / hypothesis, and then you can marshal, and you can also do the same in a theory of change. So is eradication effective? So we're allowing people in Miradi to create this new object of these questions / assumptions. And then we're hoping to populate a table that might look something like this. So when you would see in Miradi, in addition to actions and progress, also a questions tab, where you would have your analytical questions listed. What are the assumptions? You could expand those into sort of sub-assumptions or sub-claims underneath those. You could list the evidence for that assumption and your confidence in it, and then the implications. And if you're very confident, then you just get on with the work. But if you need more information or you're confident, then that may generate some information needs, which become the basis for your monitoring work and additional monitoring you have to do going forward. So we're pretty excited about this because it kind of integrates both evidence and monitoring into sort of one information cloud about that you need to sort of manage your project and do your program and do work over time. So we're hoping to build that in the near future into Miradi, and it's obviously under development. We'd love feedback and people interested in helping us to test this. The other part I want to talk about from a learning perspective, and some of you have seen this before, but it's this idea that if we really want to get smart and create a science of better conservation, we need standardization. Just like E.O. Wilson can show you type specimens of ants, we're starting to create from very specific actions. So maybe a group that's doing community guards on sea turtle nesting beaches somewhere in the Caribbean. You can see the theory of change here. You can see their indicators. So this is specific. This is the actual work that's being done, and people are recording what's happening. Maybe there's another site somewhere in Africa where people are doing ranger patrols, and you can see to stop pangolin poaching. And so it's a totally different continent, totally different species, system, biome, everything about this is different. And yet the underlying theory of change is very similar. And so we can use those to create these generic actions. And these generic actions then become the knowledge or wisdom that can be used to inform ongoing action. So it's this iteration between specific and generic actions that I showed you before. And you can create objectives and indicators, standard objectives and indicators that people could actually use. And we can start to learn about the conditions under which this might work or might not work. So again, the problem in the evidence world is that when people are generating, does this intervention work, they're relying primarily on published academic papers and stuff in the published literature when they do these systematic reviews. And that's really a small fraction of the overall case experience. So those academics, they're blind. They're not seeing this dark matter of all the information available in your projects and in your notebooks and your field things and things like that. So we think there's a real role for Miradi to step in and help create 2 additional evidence libraries. A library of specific conservation actions, ideally coupled to a spatial interface, so people can record what they did where and what's taken place. And then we already have in place now, we just launched it last year, a library of generic conservation actions with outcomes and measures, and that's that CAMEL library that we've talked about before. And so in Miradi, in addition to your home and your projects, you can hopefully eventually, if people commit to making things public, you can see examples of specific real world work, and you can also see these building blocks or these collections of generic templates or patterns, such as in the CAMEL library. So that's where we see Miradi as being really important in learning from others. So to summarize our tour of Miradi Up, it's really about helping teams implement the conservation standards, managing individual projects more effectively, combining projects into programs, and learning from others. What I'd like to do is just take a couple moments here to talk about Miradi's new pricing structure, the business side of this, and then we'll have a little bit of time for discussion and also feedback and next steps. So for those of you who have been around for the Miradi ride for a while, you probably know how we operate, but it is user-supported software. So we started Miradi way back in 2005. We got a little bit of funding from 5 organizations, TNC, WWF, WCS, FOS, and I think RARE, were the 5 groups. And they each put in a little bit of money. We built a working prototype. We got some money from the Packard Foundation, from the Hewlett Foundation, and then a bigger chunk from the Moore Foundation to build the basic platform. But those donors only gave us the money on the condition that going forward, we were going to be user supported. They didn't want to have to fund this in perpetuity. They wanted evidence. They wanted demand from people to show that this was valuable, that people were willing to pay for it. So we've been charging subscription fees ever since, and we've raised about 3.5 million. And all the money goes straight back into paying the engineers and the management of this stuff. So It's we actually lose FOS. We lose a little bit of money on Miradi, but it's something we're doing in order to kind of keep the thing going. It's one reason Miradi doesn't kind of grow and adapt quite as fast as maybe Google or Slack or some of these other corporate programs, but they have a lot more money to throw at what they're doing, and so we're doing the best on the budget that we have. As you can see, Miradi is open source, and so the desktop was a annual subscription fee, and then Miradi Share had some fees as well, and it's also open source. Now that we're trying to transition from the desktop fully to online, and now that we have full diagramming, we're hoping people will move from the desktop to online. The desktop is not yet going away. It'll be around for at least a couple of years to support people who don't have access to online, including people at government agencies. But we're hoping most people will move from the desktop to the online world. And because of that, we have to change our pricing model. So when you have a desktop software, you can charge per seat. Basically, if you want to use the desktop and have it on your machine, you have to get a subscription. When you look at software as a service, we did a little bit of thinking about the different types of systems that are out there. And we realized that there's really kind of 4 quadrants of how you can think about software as a service. And so this is important so that you understand where our pricing model is coming from. So many software systems like Salesforce or TurboTax or Replicon, which is our time tracking system that we use at FOS, in those cases, it's used by people inside a host organization, and they're entering needed data. So for example, we do all our timesheets on Replicon. If I hire a new staff member, I'm going to be willing to buy them a license to use Replicon because I need to get them to enter their time tracking data in the system that we're using. And so there's an incentive for people in that organization to buy a seat. And so you can sell the software basically per seat. But if you look at these softwares, so things like Miro or Mural or Zoom, in these cases, what you're really trying to do is get people to collaborate. And you're trying to get people to share information. And so if I'm running a Zoom call and I want you to join my Zoom call, I don't want you to have a Zoom license in order to join my Zoom call. I want it to be open to anyone who wants to come and play on my space. And so we think Miradi is going to be much more like this case where the owner of the project or program wants to invite outsiders to play with the content, but doesn't want licenses to be a barrier, if that makes sense to you all. And so because of that, we think Miradi is more in this space. And so we're adopting a subscription system where basically, as you'll see here, there are 3 types of subscriptions. So there's a free subscription, and that's the one that many of you created already and you have already logged into Miradi with. And that's just so the system knows who you are. And then you can come and play on any project or program someone else invites you to play with. So if you have a free subscription, it's like you can then come and play in someone else's space and do whatever you need to do. So that's to get things going. And that's different than the free trial. That's just the free subscription. It lasts forever. Whoever has a free subscription can come and work wherever they need to work. The next is more like the existing desktop subscription. And this is an individual subscription, $300 a year. That's the same price as desktop. We've dropped the low income price and we're still offering a 2-month free trial. And in this one, you basically can do everything with the free. But in this case, you can also create as many projects as you want and share them with other people for viewing. But the line here is you can't invite other people to edit your projects. So you can share stuff with people for viewing. They can look at it, whatever, but they can't edit it. If you want your colleagues to edit stuff and share projects for collaborative team editing, then you're in the team and program space. And here, we're trying to just sort of have these be a program room that you're running with some number of projects in it. So maybe you only have 1 project you're managing and your team is just working on 1 project. Maybe you have 5 to 9 projects. Maybe you have 50 or between 50 and 100 projects. I want to be really clear here. What we don't want to be in the business of is I have a space for 5 projects, and now in September I'm adding a 6th project, so I need to adjust my annual fee for an extra 4 months and 2 weeks for that year. We don't want to be in that level of detail of tracking all this kind of stuff. Okay. What we're trying to do is just create a room size that's about the size of the number of projects you have for that year. And we're hoping that you'll create and work on whatever you need to work on in that number of projects. And then at the next year, if you find you've doubled, let's talk about increasing your license as appropriate. We want to make this easy and fair for people, but we also need to charge small programs a little bit less and larger programs a bit more. And that's all we're trying to scale here. Does that make sense to folks? People understand the logic? once you have a project, you can invite as many people as you want to come play on it. And these are only shared projects. If you want to have scratch projects or projects that you're using for your own purpose, that's like the individual. You get unlimited numbers of those. So we're trying, it's a little confusing, but it's the best thing we could figure out to sort of meter things so larger programs pay more, smaller ones pay less, and it's fair. To encourage public access, we're also saying that basically, if you make your projects public, we're not going to count them. So with some limits there too. So we're also encouraging people to make them public so that incents that behavior. Again, I hope you guys understand, if you wouldn't be on this call at 10 at night or 4 in the morning or whatever it is for you, if you didn't already care about Miradi. So I think you guys understand, we're not trying to get rich off Miradi. We just need to raise some money in order to kind of keep this thing being built and have all these cool features coming along. And that's why we're charging folks. All right, I'll take any questions in the chat about the funding, but basically you can go to the subscriptions and then contact us. We are going to automate the individual subscriptions a little bit more, and then the group ones, talk to us and we'll figure out what works for you, for your group, and whatever would be appropriate. And we thank you for your support, because it's really what makes it happen. All right, that was a ton in a hurry about Miradi. Kari, did the thing work? Can we show people? Where are we with that?
Yes, you can. I set up 2 filters for you. So,
okay.
Yep.
So we are going to show you, demonstrate, this is what took all the bandwidth, but we were playing around with the program features of Miradi. So let me go back to my thing here. Do I have to refresh here? Yeah, I'm going to have to refresh. All right, let me refresh this. Let me show you what I'm doing here.
While it's refreshing, Nick, I'll just mention, so there were a couple of questions in the chat box about getting data out of Miradi, and this is one example of getting data out into a format that you can open directly in Excel.
Okay, so these data are now valid as of 9:42. So after the challenge 6 minutes ago. Where I went here is you can go to date. This is so where I am, just to orient you. If you look at the overall work here, let's see if we get to the top here. Why is this not showing? Oh,
You're
so
at the top.
Okay, I'm in the program. So if I'm in the Miradi demonstration program, I won't go back because I don't want to have to reload this, but I'm in the demonstration program at the program level now, not at the project level. So you guys were working on individual projects, but this is at that overall program level. You can come to these data views and you can look at some data views across all your projects. So this is pulling data from, and then Kari also set up a custom report, which has certain information here. So what I'm looking here is, this is session 2, group 1, and we're pulling out from this all their activities and their progress ratings on how they did. So you can see that this group got through B1 through B7. They didn't get into any of the E's. They finished a couple of the I's. So we're looking at how that group did. So a round of applause for group 1. Look how far they got. All right, let's scroll down. If we scroll down, or I could also just filter that here. So I could come here to this button here, and sorry, I can filter this. So now I want to say, let's not look at group 1, let's look at group 3 and see how they did. So now we're looking at group 3, and if you look at group 3, they didn't make any progress. I suspect, looking at their session, they made a lot of progress. They just didn't record their progress ratings. So they get points off for not following instructions and recording their progress ratings over time. And that's their problem. But as a manager, right, you can peer into people's projects. You could sort of say, hey, my teammates in that group maybe need some instruction or some help, and they would need some help to improve what they're doing. All right, let's look at group 4. Group 4, how did they do? They completed through B1, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know why this is not quite in sort order, but okay, I guess I could sort this better. But they got through some of the beginner stuff, so they did pretty well here. Group 6 completed all the beginner stuff, so you can see here. And look at that, they made it through a bunch of the intermediate stuff as well, too. So group 6 is doing really well here on their work. Okay, let's look at group 8. Group 8 here. Finished the beginner stuff, so they got through the beginner stuff, and that's really cool. Group 9, here they got through a couple of the beginner things, and then they got through a whole bunch of, so these are the beginner, sorry, that's 9, just got through a couple of the beginner things where they recorded their success. And finally, group 14 here, if we look at where they did, they were able to complete a whole bunch of the beginner stuff and some of the intermediate as well. Again, it's just to mainly show you the power of being able to look not just within one project, but across projects in your program, harness that data. And through these different filters, or then you can export this to CSV, or as Mike and Annette can show you, you can dump it into Power BI. You can do all kinds of cool things with the data and start to make sense of them once those are in there. Kari, what did I miss? Does that make sense?
No, no, that's good.
All right.
I just wanted to answer Gustavo's question real quickly, since we do have other language speakers online right now. His question is, are there any other plans to have Miradi share in other languages as well, like Miradi desktop? There's one thing that you can do right now. You can develop custom language packs, but they're not like languages that we speak. But if you have different names for some of the elements, like if you call targets focal interests, or if you call threats pressures, you can develop a language pack for your program and then implement that in Miradi, and it'll apply it to all of the relevant factors within the program. We are talking about how to translate Miradi share into other languages and what tools are available in an online space to do that. It's a bit different than the desktop language pack, but we are having conversations about how to use the web tools to translate Miradi share. We don't know how we're going to do it yet, but it's definitely a topic of conversation. And the recording will be posted on the CCNet website, the Rally website.
So the last thing I kind of want to leave you with here is the platform is really starting to grow a lot faster, moving things on. So one reason we wanted to get out of the desktop is the desktop was really hard to do new releases and to kind of update features. For those of you who've been using Miradi online, you realize we've been kind of introducing new features every couple of weeks and sort of just slipping them in there and kind of improving things over time. We have a lot more ability to kind of improve and grow things. So now I think we can be a lot more responsive to user needs to some degree. So when you come to support here, if you come to support and provide general feedback or new features, please, please, please send us your ideas, things that you want. We'd be happy to have conversations, have discussions, but we will track this. You can also do it in the chat to this thing, but it's more permanent if you do it through the app itself and come through and let us know what you want. There's a lot of really exciting development. We have some funds from the Moore Foundation to be working on some things and some other groups as well. So we would certainly welcome feedback and ideas that you might have. Any last questions? We can take the last 5 minutes for any discussions. And also there is, I will alert you because the CCNet people want us to do it. There's an evaluation form that CCNet has.
Oh yeah.
We would encourage you to please fill out the evaluation form.
I'll post those now. And Nick, there's a chat about subscriptions for you in the chat box. Okay, how can we find an institution, find out if we have access to a certain number of licenses? So when it comes time to renewal, each organization that has an institutional license, we usually have a point person and they'll be working with Adrian. If you don't know who your point person is or you want to find out, send an email to support and we'll get the whole dialogue and conversation started. And so we're happy to kind of work with everyone. And especially now with the new platform and new things on, it's time to sort of revisit these things. So we're happy to have sort of quote unquote sales calls. It sounds more formal than we actually are, but a conversation with whatever you need to get you up and running. The app will not be continued to Miradi Share or Miradi Online. We're actually going to just call it Miradi. It's becoming Miradi. So Miradi is becoming the online version, and then we'll kind of use Miradi Desktop to refer to the older version. So it is sort of hopefully supplanting it and taking it over time. There's a question, is it possible to upload desktop projects on the Miradi Share? Absolutely. So the check-in, check-out still works. That will work for the foreseeable future. When you check in and check out, there's a few things. There's a lot of stuff you can do online that you can't do on the desktop. So hopefully that won't interfere with your ability to use desktop, but just be aware of that.
Sorry, just to mention that the link to the evaluation was used for the leads evaluation, not the session evaluation. I can provide in a second.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, don't fill out that one. Fill out the one that Gustavo's going to give you. Any other thoughts, questions, worries? Dan, you've been involved from Miradi forever. Anything you want to say?
I am super impressed with the pace of improvement, having been with the project from the beginning. I just feel like we've got really, really good people working on this, the Sitka Tech operation, the user interface, the programming side, the Kari's involvement on the FOS side. So it's just, it's been great to see this get this type of pace and new features and functionality. So super excited about that. I'm using it. I'm no longer part of the regular Miradi development team, but I'm using it to manage the sustainability program work in the Nature Conservancy, and I'm a big fan and continue to see this being a game changer for conservation projects around the world.
So Becky's asking, can you lose info that was underlined? Like, you will not lose information. What happens, the more annoying thing is sometimes if you have your factors perfectly positioned online, they'll be slightly adjusted for you when you move them into desktop. So there's a little positioning stuff that can be annoying, like row heights and things. We're working on trying to clean that up and make it better, but you will not lose information.
I think also to Becky's question, if you have editor permission to a project, I think pretty much now everything you can see online is editable, because we can now edit viability, we can now edit threat ratings. So all of the content you see online, if you have editor permissions for a project, is now editable, which is fantastic. That's new within the last few weeks, really, or actually this weekend when threat rating became fully functional.
So there are two things missing, Kari. So one thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
The one thing is that, and I already mentioned this before, but right now you still can't copy multiple factors at once, and you can't create a results chain from a situation analysis. That's coming hopefully in the next few weeks. And then the other big thing is work planning. We have not tackled work planning from desktop, and I saw some work about that earlier. It's something we'd like to do. I think the work planning in desktop was a kind of an interesting, it was a really clever design, but it was a poor user interface, and it's hard to use. So we're trying to rethink work planning and make it better online. And hopefully it'll probably take us about a year to get that done, but we're going to work on that.
And the scope, being able to edit the scope information is coming.
Is that not there already?
It seems to be locked. You can edit this the project summary, but you don't seem to be able to edit the scope.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Stuff, or maybe it's already changed.
Let me look at that. I would have assumed it was editable, to be honest. So I may have to check that.
Yeah.
We'll get back to you on that.
Does it depend on your status as far as being able to just view, or be a manager or an editor?
I've got manager status.
Manager status.
It should be fully editable. I'm in a project right now, the template that we were working in, and the scope on the scope tab. If Nick goes to the scope into a project.
Let me go to a project. Yeah, that's how I was like. Why
Yeah, it's fully editable. Oh, no, I take that back. You're totally right. The scope box is editable, but the other content areas are not yet editable.
See, that's a great example. That's a great example.
Stakeholder, yeah.
That's
the stakeholder information and the protected area information you can't edit online.
Okay,
right.
That we need to fix. Yeah.
That we could fix, I think, quickly. Yeah. So
thank you for bringing it to our attention. Someone's asking a question. If there are a few breakout groups working on different results chains in Miradi, how to combine them later? So I'll tell you right now, the best thing to do is download it to desktop, and where you can cut and paste whole chains and multiple factors and do it in desktop and bring it back up. As soon as we release the ability to combine different chains, you'll be able to do more of that online. And what we're working on with the project program relationships is actually ways of linking project level stuff to program level stuff. And there's there'll be a whole lot of interesting thinking about how to link things across different levels. So for now, I would bring it down to desktop and copy and paste there, but hopefully soon you'll be able to do that online. And we apologize for that. Believe me, no one's more frustrated than not being able to copy and paste multiple things than me and Kari, but it's just, we're trying to get there. All right, well, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you all for your patience and for daring to undertake the Miradi challenge. And another thing we could do, Kari, another thing we could maybe commit to is maybe periodic sort of Miradi Q&A or office hour sessions where people could join, or
Yes, we could. And I think we're also going to do a Q&A from all of the chat questions. So we'll include with our materials for the rally session a full Q&A.
And can I just put a vote of thanks to Foundations for Success for the support? It's always really quick and thorough.
Cheers. Well, Felix gets the credit there mainly, but yeah, thank you.
Great.
All right. Well, happy Miradiing, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation going forward.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Fantastic job. Thank you.